Thank you so much for coming here today. Today is that we are celebrating the International Day of Human Rights. And as One Free World International, we decided that we will be focusing on China in this important day. My name is Reverend Majid Shafai. I'm the founder and president of One Free World International. For years and years, the Chinese government been ignoring the human right in China, been ignoring the rights of the minorities, allegation of torture, concentration camps, organ harvest, with us here heroes from the Church of the Almighty God, from the Falun Gong community, from the Uyghur community, from the Tibetan community, fighters of human rights in China. Many of them faced persecution. Many of them still until now, their community facing persecution. Our message today to the Chinese government that we build a coalition with the lead of One Free World International. We build amazing coalition to fight and to promote the human rights in China. Our request that we are accept from the Falun Gong organization, our request is to meet with the Chinese ambassador. The Chinese government over and over indicated that they are more than welcome with a dialogue with human rights. This is proven false, but we are giving them the benefit of the doubts. We are more than happy, and we request meeting with the Chinese ambassador to discuss the human rights violation that taking place in his place. Plus, we are discussing as well, and we request to meet with the Prime Minister of Canada in order to promote as well and to make Canada do more when it comes to the human right in China. Make no mistake, China become Canada's dilemma, moral dilemma. Even in the previous government, with the Prime Minister Stephen Harper, it started very strong with regard to the human rights situation in China. He said that our value cannot be valued with the almighty dollar. And yet, by the end of his terms, he was waiting in the airport for a Qatari banda in order to promote the trade with China. Today, we see with the Liberal government, there is no change. We see that there is a foreign affairs minister standing beside a Canadian foreign affairs minister, standing beside the Chinese foreign affairs minister, and the Chinese foreign affairs minister insulted a Canadian journalist, and yet our Canadian foreign affairs minister did not say a word. Today, Canada is very strong when it comes to the human rights issues in Saudi Arabia, the Rohingya, and other issues. But when it comes to China, we are silent. This cannot be Canada that we love. This is not Canada that we are proud of. And for that, we are requesting to meet with the Prime Minister of Canada and the Chinese ambassador. Thank you. I would like to hear more from our delegation from each group. From the Falun Gong, John, please.
Good morning. My name is Xun Li, President of Falun Dafa Association of Canada. Today, on the International Human Rights Day, we deliver two messages to our government. Number one, Falun Dafa Association of Canada is calling on Canada to sanction 14 current and former Chinese Communist Party officials under the Magnitsky Act. Our submission made this morning at 2 o'clock to Ministry of Foreign Affairs today contains extensive evidence of these individuals' gross human rights abuses in the heinous torture and killing of Falun Gong practitioners. Falun Gong, also called Falun Dafa, is a Chinese spiritual practice, embodies the tenets of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. The regime in its barbarity has gone as far as torture, killing, and orchestrating large-scale forced live organ harvesting from Falun Gong prisoners of conscience. Today, second message, we issue an urgent call to action to our government to help rescue 10 family members of Canadians and a Canadian citizen, Mr. Sun Qian, who are currently illegally detained and imprisoned in China for their peaceful belief and the practice of Falun Gong. In addition, to help end this senseless, horrific persecution and its crimes against humanity. Thank you.
Thank you. We welcome right now the Tibetan representative.
Good morning. My name is Sonam Chuki. I am a Tibetan Canadian and the National Director at Students for Free Tibet Canada, a nonprofit that represents a grassroots network of Tibetans and allies across Canada who are gravely concerned about China's violent occupation of Tibet. I am also the daughter of a stateless refugee. My father had to escape his home in Tibet around the time of China's illegal invasion in 1959. Since then, the situation in Tibet has undergone a drastic decline. Over 1.2 million Tibetans have been killed by the Chinese Communist Party, and more than 2,000 known political prisoners are currently languishing in Chinese prisons, including Tibetan language rights advocate Dashi Wangchuk, who was arrested on January 27, 2016, after appearing in a New York Times documentary about the preservation of the Tibetan language. After 2 years of arbitrary detention, he was recently sentenced to 5 years imprisonment. There is clearly no freedom of speech, religion, or language, and Tibet is experiencing a modern-day cultural genocide. Just 2 days ago, Dukho, a Tibetan man in his 20s, self-immolated in Ngaba, Tibet, to protest China's human rights abuses. Since 1998, 164 Tibetans have self-immolated with the demand of freedom for Tibet and the return of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. For the last 3 years, Tibet has been ranked as the least free region in the world, only second to Syria. What will it take for the Chinese government to address Tibetans' long-standing grievances? How many more lives must be lost? Today, we call on Prime Minister Trudeau and the Canadian government to publicly express your concerns about the self-immolations in Tibet and call for the immediate and unconditional release of Dashi Wangchuk. We further urge you to work collectively with other governments on a multilateral approach to press China to end its violent rule in Tibet. Closed-door meetings are simply not enough. To uphold Canadian values of freedom and justice, and in recognition of the Tibetan Canadians whose families in Tibet are suffering immensely under China's current crackdown, Canada must stand up for Tibet. If those who live directly under China's rule can time and time again stand up to one of the most powerful nations on earth led by a violent regime, can't Canada do more?
Thank you. Representative from the Church of the Almighty God.
Hi, good morning. My name is Lin from the Church of Almighty God. Our church is founded in 1991, and it is the largest and fastest growing Chinese Christian new religious movement in mainland China. And the church has 4 million members in mainland China. So since its establishment, the CAG has been continually and brutally suppressed and persecuted by the Chinese Communist government. Up to the present, the CAG is one of the most severely persecuted religious movements in China. It has also been attacked through an unprecedented campaign of fake news and accused of crimes it has never committed, as Western scholars have clearly proved. According to the rough statistics up to the present, at least 400,000 members of the church has been arrested, of which over 43,000 were tortured and 91 were persecuted to death. Around 600,000 members of the church were forced to leave their homes to avoid arrest. Several thousands have escaped abroad seeking for asylum. Especially in 2018, the CCP launched a nationwide suppression against the church, which is titled Operation Thunder. As of April to October, the incomplete statistic shows that 3,575 church members have been arrested and 7 were persecuted to death from June to October. Today is Human Rights Day. Together with other religious groups and organizations who are also the victims of the CCP's persecution, we strongly condemn the CCP's crime of suppressing the religious belief and trampling the international human rights law, and urge the CCP to stop the inhumane persecution immediately. Thank you.
Thank you. The representative from the Uyghur Muslim community.
Hello, my name is Itabar Artis. I'm here today on behalf of the East Turkestan Association of Canada. As you all know, in the situation of Uyghurs in East Turkestan, so-called Xinjiang, faces the genocide by Chinese Communist Party. Here today, I don't want to talk about the human rights because Uyghurs do not have any privacy inside or outside of their homes. And how could we talk about the human rights? Chinese government has been sending millions of Han Chinese to stay with Uyghurs in their home to monitor them. Also today in 21st century, we are seeing Nazi-style concentration camp again in East Turkestan. This is clearly a genocide. Depends on the Mihrigil Tursun testimony at the American Congress during her 3 months experience in the camp. 9 Uyghur women have been killed. If we do not take an immediate action, Chinese government will speed up its genocide process. Uyghurs are being tortured mentally, emotionally, physically, and sexually. There is no word to explain the severity of the physical abuses. The Chinese government is doing ethnic cleansing and genocide on Uyghurs. East Turkestan Association of Canada urges Canadian government to issue public statement to condemn Chinese mass incarceration of more than 2 million of Uyghurs, Kazakh, and other ethnic groups without any charges indefinitely and work with the right-minded countries to create strong coalition for strong action against China. East Turkestan Association of Canada further urges Canadian government to call on China to immediately close the concentration camp in East Turkestan and release over 2 million innocent Uyghurs, Kazakh, and other Turkish Muslims who are being held in detention center without any charges. Impose action on Chinese government and party officials responsible for the ongoing crime against humanity. Impose sanctions on Chinese and international companies complicit in this crime. Investigate and enforce the domestic law to protect citizens and asylum seekers who are Uyghur from constant harassment, threats, coercion, and reprisal by the Chinese security agencies. Publicly affirm a policy of never deporting Uyghur refugees and asylum seekers back to China. Prioritize humanitarian acceptance of stateless and at-risk Uyghur refugees currently exposed to reprisals or deportation to third countries. We ask Canadian government to use Canadian Magnitsky Act to punish those Chinese officials who are responsible for this crime against humanity in East Turkestan. We also ask Canadian government to force Chinese government to release innocent Canadian citizen Hussein Jalil, who has been serving life sentence since 2006. His Canadian wife and children have the right to have him in Canada to live together. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have as well a representative from the Federation of Democracy in China and also my co-chair of my coalition. Please come in.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yes. As you see now here, and we are from the Falun Gong practitioners and the Tibetans and Uyghurs communities and the Almighty God, and also from the overseas Chinese democracy movement. And also we should have Taiwanese and North Korean community to join us. But because of the limitation, they cannot speak here. And also we have the political prisoners' children are here in the building accompanying us. Why we are here? Because those people are being persecuted in China. And the situation is getting worse and worse. And the situation must be stopped and must be changed, that Canada must act. And I couldn't even sleep for one minute last night because of I was continually to receive a text message from my friend who is in China, and she was telling me that the Chinese government was arresting people from a church. It was about 80 people arrested for yesterday, and until 2:10, and she stopped to write to me, and she said, "I am under control by police officer." It is December 10th of 2018, and this is continually every minute. And the people said that is the retaliation action from the Chinese government to Canadian arrested Ms. Meng Wanzhou in Canada. And I ask our Canadian government to stay strongly and firmly, steadily for this matter, because this is really important for Chinese people, to fight for their human rights, and because of for the past 30 years that most Western country, they will make deals with the Chinese government. And then the Chinese government, they knows about these skills. And also, I was raised the case of Yang Tianshi in Parliament hearing 2006 in November, and he was arrested and sentenced to 12 years. But after 12 years, we cannot see him anymore because he died in prison last November. And now we have another case, Huang Qi. He has been put into prison for 3 times, and now he is waiting for his trial. And his mother his mother was arrested as well too. And so we need Canada to act as soon as possible to save the lives. And there is a genocide in China, not only to its own people and also to Tibetans, to Uyghurs, to Falun Gong practitioners, and to the Church of Almighty God people. So the world must act, end this, and then we can celebrate a real International Human Rights Day. Thank you very much.
We have here an old friend, the Honorable Peter Kent. He will say a few words in solidarity. Please.
Well, thank you, Reverend Al Shafi and One Free World International for bringing together this delegation on International Human Rights Day to urge the Government of Canada, the Liberal Prime Minister, to end 3 years of muted comment on increasing human rights violations in China against any number of organizations and individual Chinese citizens. I am the chair of the Parliamentary Friends of Falun Gong, but 6 years ago, when I was International Executive Co-Chair of the China Council on Development and the Environment, there were signals from the Communist Chinese government, from President Xi, from Premier Li Keqiang, that China was gradually moving towards greater respect for human rights and the fundamental principles of free speech, free association, the practice of religion freely. But we have seen in the years since a sharp reversal and an increasing documented, very accurately documented set of instances of gross violation of human rights. I agree with those on this delegation who have called on the Liberal government today to use the proven effective tools of the Magnitsky Act to impose sanctions against those individuals readily identifiable who have been involved in any number of violations of human rights against all of the groups and representatives and peoples represented here today. But again, I thank you, Reverend Al Shafi and One Free World International for reminding Canadians and reminding the Government of Canada on International Human Rights Days that it's time for once to put aside whatever objectives the Liberal government may see with regards to free trade with China and begin speaking out honestly and directly and firmly against those in the Chinese Communist government that are violating human rights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now open the floor for questions.
Yes, please. If there is any questions and answers, we are more than happy to provide answers if we can. Any questions and answers? Go ahead.
You mentioned, and the lady also mentioned the situation with the arrest of the CFO of Huawei. How do you tie that to China's behavior towards Canadian politicians and their stance on human rights? How are the two related, and what do you suggest that they do with respect to the bail hearing or the transfer of Meng to the United States?
I believe, first of all, let's take a look at Wenju. case to start with. If she and her company violated the international laws and the sanctions against Iran, or her company was proven to create a software that will be spying on our Canadian companies or American companies, she deserves to face justice. Justice is something that she will be facing in the Canadian court and the American court that the Chinese government could not provide to their very own citizens, such as the groups that are standing behind us. Canada have to stand strong, firm. We are a country of law. We're a country that we have to cooperate with our alliance in the United States. In the same time, I don't want Canada to be in the middle of two giants that they're fighting. But Canada have to have its own stance. I think that this is a great opportunity to show the Canadians and the Canadian public that Canada is not a small little guy in the middle. Canada is also a giant when it comes to human rights, and we can make a difference. And if this woman been proven guilty, she have to be presented to the justice system as anybody, as any citizen. And we're requesting from the Canadian government to have a stronger stand on this case. Any more questions, please?
Sorry, I was late. I hear Mr. Kendall was talking about using Magnitsky law to sanction the people persecuting. Can you be more concrete how we can do this?
Please.
Well, you've heard in the testimony offered by the leaders of the various groups represented in today's delegation that in fact there is documented evidence of who has been directly responsible for carrying out at the direction of the Chinese Communist government, but who has been carrying out the specific acts violating the human rights of individuals and of groups, and this goes back over any number of years. So just as Canada has listed individuals in Saudi Arabia, in Venezuela, in Russia, and elsewhere with regards to sanctions, with ban on their transfer of funds or visas to visit Canada, those sorts of applications of the Magnitsky Act, I believe would work very effectively, and it would be a very long list if we were to look at each of the groups represented here today, and I'm sure that there would be a tempering, at least, of if not an end, to the abuse of these various peoples and organizations in China.
But how?
Do you want to make a comment, please?
Okay, thank you for the question, and also I commend Rev. Majid Shafi for bringing the group together on this important day. And today, our group submit a list of 14 current and previous Chinese Communist officials who have gross violation, abuses in the torture and killing of Falun Gong practitioners. So this morning, we submitted to our Prime Minister of Foreign Affairs. And I believe Canada should take a forceful and the righteous and stance to bring those individuals and give us a positive response, bring those individuals to justice using the act if they physically are in Canada or their relatives, because this act not only to those individuals. So send a strong message. There is no safe haven in Canada. You have to be, in Chinese saying, there's good will be rewarded good, bad will be punished. Send a strong message to help curb and end the persecution.
Thank you.
Can I add something for the? Yeah,
Please,
I want to add something for the Meng Wanzhou's case. Just besides our teacher, our chair's wonderful comments, that I'm calling on Trudeau's government not to make deal with Chinese government on Meng Wanzhou's case, because if our Canadian government to make a deal with them is not only to sell our principle, but also to sell out the chance of the Chinese people fighting for human rights, because the Chinese government, they are using their own people as the hostage. You see that they are acting very brutally to persecute its own people, and in case to probably want to, to change of the freedom of Meng Wanzhou, but which is not going to be the case again and again, that the international community need to understand that the Chinese people are not the hostage for the international, to make a deal with Chinese communists. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further question before we close, before the closing remark, please? No questions. In the last 5 minutes of this press conference, I'd like to thank all of you for coming. I'd like to thank all the groups, the Honorable Peter Kent. All of you are heroes, and an honor to serve with you and to work with you. As I said, our coalition this is the start of our coalition. Our main request is to meet with the Chinese ambassador. I will ask him to face us. If he's not scared of us, I will ask him to sit down and face us. And I'm asking as well from the Prime Minister of Canada to sit down with us, not to send his aide or to send somebody work with him. We are Canadian citizens as well, and we have the right to meet with him. So I'm asking from both of them to have a meeting in order to start a dialogue and in order to take real steps to solve this human rights violation. I'm asking as well from the Canadian government to take a strong stand with regard to the case of Ms. Zhu and how Canada have to stand strong when it comes to our justice system. We thank you, and we hope all the best. And as it stands right now in this Human Rights Day, we know that we will not give up. We know that after every night there is new morning, carrying new day. We know that after every storm there is sunshine. We believe that they can always kill the dreamer, but no one can kill the dream. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.